And a good Easter morning to you. It is 10:30 Central Time here at United Protestant Church in Morgan Park in Duluth, Minnesota. And we gather to bear witness and wonder. We gather to share this wonder. And you in your home, it is a gray morning with a cold wind, and we self-isolate. Not for fear of the cultural powers that be, as the disciples isolated, but for the safety of us all. But let me welcome you here and now watching this or reading this in printed text. Let me welcome you to this time of witness, this time of wonder. Let's tell the story, friends. Let's live into this story. And it begins with the Gospel of John. This is chapter 28, 1 through 18, if you're following along. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in. And he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? For whom are you looking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. Resurrection, friends. You see, Jesus commissions Mary Magdalene to tell the disciples. Maybe he knew that she'd tell the story straight. I mean, I've heard the kind of fish stories that men like to share. I tell you, it was this big, and each year it gets bigger and bigger. And then there's the fish stories of the one that got away. And this is what Mary must have been thinking. The one that got away. As she's curled in a ball by his tomb in the cold and lonely cage of sorrow and confusion, he was supposed to be But they killed him. And he let them kill him. Theologian Richard Lisher reminds us, here he's quoting Paul Tillich, actually, another great theologian, that the Messiah was born in a grave. He writes this: those who skip Thursday and Friday but show up on Easter Sunday are missing the essential truth of the Passion. They also bypass the profound grief that attends Jesus' death. But there's more to it than that. They have also missed one of Jesus' most important lessons before dying, he writes. During Holy Week, Jesus teaches us the art of losing. Jesus teaches us the art of losing. In a very literal sense, Christians come from a long line of losers. And we'll lose again. We'll hurt. We'll cry. We'll feel desperation. So why is the pastor talking so much about loss and losers on Easter morning? I'm doing so because my work, both as a pastor and a Christian, is to understand resurrection and know resurrection in my deepest heart. And I think that loss might be the inroad to Jesus. That might be what God's big Messiah lesson is all about here as we walk in our earthly faith. It might just be what God is trying to teach us. I mean, think of Mary. Doesn't even recognize Jesus at first. Not only for her despair, but because it is so unbelievable. It is incomprehensible. And she is awestruck. She is dumbfounded. Wonderment is the word Sigurd Olsen uses in his writing. I love it. Nothing she can imagine. Now, friends, the Gospel of John is all about resurrection. Light defeats dark. But we're here to share that the story doesn't end with resurrection. No, friends, crucifixion and resurrection are ongoing. I think of the song that arose from this narrative we're all familiar with in the church. I come to the garden alone while the dew is still on the roses. You know it, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. But then there's that last line, that last verse. I'd stay in the garden with him, though the night around me is falling, but he bids me go through the voice of woe. His voice to me is calling. Jesus tells Mary, do not hold on to me. I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. And we are called back into this world. That's the lesson of resurrection, friends. We are called back into this world, a world that is suffering. And it might just be that the best way we can practice resurrection now, here in our present lives, is to receive and understand and name and claim loss and brokenness, and know, as Mary learned, and as we continue to learn, that loss and brokenness are part of the story. But they are not the end of the story. Friends, that's what we've learned. They are not the end of the story. New life, resurrected life, cannot be killed. And here I want to quote Barbara Brown Taylor in her amazing sermon on this. She says, new life cannot be killed. And if we remember that, then there is nothing we cannot do. Move mountains, banish fear, love our enemies, change the world. The only thing we cannot do is hold on to him. Instead, we must let him take us where he is going, to be with God, a God of the future, drawing us forward into new life. In her book, Preaching Justice, Chris Smith puts it this way: many people in our religious communities speak about resurrection as the dramatic new life that happens exclusively to individuals after bodily death. However, she writes, I believe that Christianity is about forming a people who take seriously resurrection in their everyday lives and move their bodies and lives into places where their embodied power can make a difference. What would it mean if our ministry called us to place our flesh and blood wherever people hurt and suffer, wherever the innocent are violated and oppressed, wherever people are struggling for life? And she ends, wherever embodied love and presence exist with vitality and strength, wherever people refuse to abandon life, or wherever the power of death cannot silence the power of life, I believe we are standing in the presence of resurrection. And that's what we bring to Easter. That's what we bring to Easter. Not that our superhero with God on his side faced death and kicked its butt, but that the Messiah, whom God chose, faced death in the first place. Knew in all his bodily pain as he is nailed on that cross the capacity for evil and fear and violence. Because he knew that if our Christian hearts are open, those would be very real experiences in our lives. And we are taught to see not just the idea of resurrection, but the potential for resurrection. We are all broken people. In our lives, we all participate, knowingly or not, in the same ideologies of fear and violence that crucified Jesus. We see it around us. But Jesus teaches us to see the potential of resurrection in ourselves, the potential of resurrection in our communities, the potential of resurrection in our world. It's big picture, yes, I know. But here's where I remind you that resurrection is in the small things, the day-to-day places, and in Christians' work as a collective. I think of Paul Hawken as he's lecturing around the country about the perils of our culture, corporate greed, destruction of our natural balances, and the need for change. And he hears these examples as he's lecturing in the communities that he travels to, small groups of people who take matters of brokenness, matters of crucifixion in their own communities into their own hands. He gathered these stories that he learned together to produce his book, Blessed Unrest. And friends, I tell you, it's one of the more hopeful books I have ever read. I also think of A Force More Powerful, both the documentary and the book, documenting instances of nonviolent resistance. All the small ways simple people stood up in the face of crucifixion and turned toward resurrection. It is a daily act, a daily choice we make. So what are you doing now? Here, as you listen from home, to keep yourself falling into frustration or anxiety or depression or negativity, what do you do now? Friends, we talk about this all the time here at United Protestant Church. The daily choices we make, the ways every day that God is walking with you, guiding you. I think of some of those nuggets of wisdom and learning that we've shared in Bible studies and conversations around the table from the pulpit. We talk about how many amazingly generative and growing things happen in times of darkness. The seed in the ground, the life in the womb, the soul facing a dark night of difficulty, sorrow, or fear. And we know and we remember, friends, that amazing growth happens in the darkest places. And I think about how we've shared in this church, hold your disciplines, hold your practices, keep healthy in the physical, the mental, the spiritual. Keep reaching out with your senses and with your prayer. Not every day is going to be and provide great epiphany. But we don't get up one day and become an elite athlete. We don't pick up an instrument and become a virtuoso. We don't pick up a pencil and instantly become a great artist or a writer. And we don't turn to prayer and instantly learn and receive all that God has to share for us. We know this. We practice. We keep our disciplines. And we've shared that when we pray, we are not to pretend that we're someone we're not. You've heard this from the pulpit before. Don't sit well-behaved like some acolyte or an altar boy saying, "Hey, God, all is fine, can't complain, I'm doing fine, could be worse." No! Let it out. Let it all out to God. I mean, who are you possibly fooling? Doesn't God know? Yes, God knows who you really are. And God is like a parent when a kid throws a tantrum. Wow, you feel really strongly about this. Are you done? Because when you're done, then we can get to work. Be yourself. In this time of isolation and any time, be yourself and be real before God. Because God doesn't need a shell or a fake person. Because God calls the true and real you. And in that call, as we've also shared here, we remember that metaphor of the lamp and the flashlight. You remember this? If you have two means of illumination in your hand, lamp and flashlight, use the lamp. For the flashlight illuminates far ahead or far back into the past and prompts something that is not real in the here and the now, often fear, anxiety, regret. But the lamp gives you just the few steps, the first few steps ahead of you. And God guides you in those steps. And as those are illuminated, the next steps are illuminated. And that is how you live, listening to God on a day-by-day basis. And that, friends, is how we practice God's presence in us in resurrection. And I say these things that I've said before, not just to repeat myself, but to share that these are but a few examples of ways that we do live into resurrection. They seem small. They seem humble. They seem isolated and individual, to be sure. But let me put it this way. And for the folks that have been in our Bible studies, I apologize for repeating this story, or even if I've preached it from the pulpit before, sorry about that. But it's worth sharing again. When my son was younger, he and I were eating one of those boxed, frozen Tony's pizzas. You know, the ones in the orangish, yellowish box? And on their supreme pizza, there were 5, count them 5, pepperonis. Just 5, and my 8-year-old son at this time hated the fact that there were just 5 pepperonis. So I took the pepperoni, put them on a cutting board, and sliced them into many, many, many small pieces. And lo and behold, that 8-year-old boy, what does he say? Wow, this pizza had so much more pepperoni. Friends, that's how, even though it's a silly metaphor, that's how we participate in resurrection. When God bids us go from the garden and bear witness to that voice of woe around us and live into resurrection, we may think we're doing it all by our lonesome in our small choices. And indeed, in our culture, we do focus so much more on the individual than the collective. But this is to tell you that God works in the small things, and that each of us, even in our most humble ways, are participants. You, today, are a participant in your small and humble way. Ongoing resurrection. The Messiah still at work. I have a friend who used to tell me she starts her day by saying, God, you're awesome. Thanks for being here today. It's your day. And then she'll enter her day in anticipation then. And of course, she has, like so many of us, even in this time, an agenda for the day, a to-do list. And the day-to-day gets filled. But there's always an aside. You never know when or how God's going to make God's presence known. You never know when you're going about your day and there's Jesus. Never know. And like Mary, you may not recognize him. Nothing Jesus ever did went along the lines of how we expected it to go. Nothing he still does today. Nothing Christians do. Because we are a resurrection people. We are an Easter people. Because the Messiah threw us for a loop, and because the Messiah continues to throw us for a loop, and we face pain and anger and hurt and death with open hearts. And we know, yes, friends, we know that these forces do not have the last word. And that is profoundly good news. The good news of Easter. And our response in gratitude? Humble, simple, loving participation in the ongoing resurrection God creates through Jesus and through his disciples that we are now. Easter is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of our ministry. It is what we live into as Christians. It is what we live into as a church. I look forward to the time we can gather again together. But we don't need to be gathered together to be that church. We are that church because we are the people who move forward in the presence of Jesus Christ. And peace be with you, friends. Before we turn to a time of prayer, I do want to remind everyone watching or reading this that we as a church rely significantly on the money we collect in our offering plates, the money passed around when we all gather. And we don't have that now. And the ministry still continues. The staff still works. The building requires still heat and electricity. So I ask, if you're able to do so, please continue your contribution. Continue the contribution or the offering you would as if you were sitting in the pews today, this Sunday, every Sunday. You can, of course, mail it to us, or just run over to the parking lot and drop it in the protected slot in the mailbox. It'll be guarded. No one can take it out. Our ministry continues, friends. So now let us take a moment of prayer. O holy and amazing God, God of second, third, fourth, and infinite chances. God that does not let death have the last word, thank you. Thank you for this wisdom. Thank you for our faith. Thank you for your presence with us day after day after day. Holy God, I ask your blessing on all that receive this message and all who pray today. Hold them in your love. Walk with them every step. Guide them with wisdom, just enough for this day of their lives. Help them to remember you have the last word. God, we're all scared and confused right now. All uncertain where this is going. All feeling the pinch and the fear of scarcity. But Holy God, we know your plan is so much bigger than anything we can possibly imagine. And so let us walk into your plan. Be part of your plan. Be participants in your plan. I ask that you bring your loving presence to those that suffer now with physical or mental illness. Those that struggle in their work, as we so say here, the front lines, the essential people. Watch over them all, Holy God. Let them know your love. And I ask your blessing on this house of worship, this ministry, and this home and sanctuary. Guide us and our people the same to do and to listen deeply to your will and your work. Give us courage to move forward. Give us confidence that you are with us. Now, Holy God, bind us together as one community, be we here or afar, as we share the prayer that your Son taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. And the glory forever, friends, indeed, he is risen, and resurrection happens even in a time of isolation. Know you are loved, and praise God that you love others. Peace be with you, friends. Amen.